Alfred Davis and his brother-in-law Hans Wilsdorf founded Wilsdorf and Davis, the company that would eventually become Rolex SA, in London, England, in 1905. Wilsdorf and Davis's main commercial activity at the time involved importing Hermann Egeler's Swiss movements to England and placing them in watch cases made by Dennison and others. These early wristwatches were sold to many jewelers, who then put their own names on the dial. The earliest watches from Wilsdorf and Davis were usually hallmarked W&D inside the caseback. In 1908, Wilsdorf registered the trademark Rolex, which became the brand name of watches from Wilsdorf and Davis. He opened an office in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. Wilsdorf wanted the brand name to be easily pronounceable in any language, and short enough to fit on the face of a watch. He also thought that the name, Rolex, was onomatopoeic, sounding like a watch being wound. In November 1915, the company changed its name to Rolex Watch Co. Limited. In 1919, Hans Wilsdorf moved the company from England to Geneva, Switzerland because of heavy post-war taxes levied on luxury imports and high export duties on the silver and gold used for the watch cases. In 1920 the company's name was officially changed to Montre Rolex SA and later to Rolex SA. With administrative worries attended to, Wilsdorf turned the company's attention to a marketing challenge: the infiltration of dust and moisture under the dial and crown, which damaged the movement. To address this problem, in 1926 a third-party casemaker produced a waterproof and dustproof wristwatch for Rolex, giving it the name, Oyster. The original patent attributed to Paul Perregaux and Georges Perret, that allowed the watch to be adjusted while maintaining protection from water ingress was purchased, not invented, by Rolex and heavily marketed. The watch featured a hermetically sealed case which provided optimal protection for the movement. As a demonstration, Rolex submerged Oyster models in aquariums, which it displayed in the windows of its main points of sale. In 1927, British swimmer Mercedes Glaetz swam the English Channel with an oyster on her necklace, becoming the first Rolex ambassador. To celebrate the feat, Rolex published a full-page advertisement on the front page of the Daily Mail for every issue for a whole month proclaiming the watch's success during the 10-hour-plus swim. In 1931, Rolex patented a self-winding mechanism called a perpetual rotor, a semicircular plate that relies on gravity to move freely. In turn, the Oyster watch became known as the Oyster Perpetual. Upon the death of his wife in 1944, Wilsdorf established the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, a private trust, in which he left all of his Rolex shares, ensuring that some of the company's income would go to charity. Wilsdorf died in 1960, and since then the trust has owned and run Rolex SA. The Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, who privately owns Rolex SA, is a registered Swiss charitable foundation and pays a lower tax rate. In 2011, a spokesman for Rolex declined to provide evidence regarding the amount of charitable donations made by the Wilsdorf Foundation, which brought up several scandals due to the lack of transparency. In Geneva, where the company is based, it is said to have gifted, among many things, 2 housing buildings to social institutions of Geneva. According to the 2017 Brand Z report, the brand value is estimated at $8.053 billion. Rolex watches continue to have a reputation as status symbols. The company produces more than 1 million timepieces each year. It is said that the power of the crown is never more felt than when trying to negotiate space in a retail environment for the product of another brand. Rolex SA offers products under the Rolex and Tudor brands. Montre Tudor SA has designed, manufactured and marketed Tudor watches since the 6th of March 1946. Rolex founder Hans Wilsdorf conceived of the Tudor Watch Company to create a product for authorized Rolex dealers to sell that offered the reliability and dependability of a Rolex, but at a lower price. The number of Rolex watches was limited by the rate that they could produce in-house Rolex movements, thus Tudor watches were originally equipped with off-the-shelf movements while using similar quality cases and bracelets. Historically, Tudor watches have been manufactured by Montre Tudor SA using movements supplied by ETA SA. Since 2015 Tudor has begun to manufacture watches with in-house movements. The first model introduced with an in-house movement was the Tudor North Flag. Following this, updated versions of the Tudor Pelagos and Tudor Heritage Black Bay have also been fitted with an in-house caliber. Tudor watches are marketed and sold in most countries around the world. Montre Tudor saw discontinued sales of Tudor-branded watches in the United States in 2004, but Tudor returned to the United States market in the summer of 2013 and to the UK in 2014. Rolex SA is a British-founded Swiss watch designer and manufacturer based in Geneva, Switzerland. Founded in 1905 as Wilsdorf and Davis by Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis in London, England, the company registered the word Rolex as the brand name of its watches in 1908, and it became Rolex Watch Co. Limited in 1915. After World War I, the company moved its base of operations to Geneva because of the unfavorable economy in the United Kingdom. In 1920, Hans Wilsdorf registered Montre Rolex SA in Geneva as the new company name. Montre is French for a watch timepiece. It later became Rolex SA. Since 1960, the company has been owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, a private family trust. Rolex SA and its subsidiary Montre Tudor SA design, make, distribute, and service wristwatches sold under the Rolex and Tudor brands. By the start of World War II, Royal Air Force pilots were buying Rolex watches to replace their inferior standard issue watches. However, when captured and sent to prisoner of war POW camps, their watches were confiscated. When Hans Wilsdorf heard of this, he offered to replace all watches that had been confiscated and not require payment until the end of the war, if the officers would write to Rolex and explain the circumstances of their loss and where they were being held. Wilsdorf was in personal charge of the scheme. As a result of this, an estimated 3,000 Rolex watches were ordered by British officers in the officer camp Auflage VB in Bavaria alone. This had the effect of raising the morale among the Allied POWs because it indicated that Wilsdorf did not believe that the Axis powers would win the war. American servicemen heard about this when stationed in Europe during World War II, and this helped open up the American market to Rolex after the war. On the 10th of March 1943, while still a prisoner of war, Corporal Clive James Nutting, one of the organizers of the Great Escape, ordered a stainless steel Rolex Oyster 3525 chronograph, valued at a current equivalent of £1,200, by mail directly from Hans Wilsdorf in Geneva, intending to pay for it with money he saved working as a shoemaker at the camp. The watch, Rolex watch number 185983, was delivered to Stalag Luft 3 on the 10th of July that year, along with a note from Wilsdorf apologizing for any delay in processing the order and explaining that an English gentleman such as Corporal Nutting should not even think about paying for the watch before the end of the war. Wilsdorf is reported to have been impressed with Nutting because, although not an officer, he had ordered the expensive Rolex 3525 Oyster chronograph, while most other prisoners ordered the much cheaper Rolex Speed King model, which was popular because of its small size. The watch is believed to have been ordered specifically to be used in the Great Escape when, as a chronograph, it could have been used to time patrols of prison guards or time the 76 ill-fated escapees through Tunnel Harry, on the 24th of March 1944. Eventually, after the war, Nutting was sent an invoice of only £15 for the watch, because of currency export controls in England at the time. The watch and associated correspondence between Wilsdorf and Nutting were sold at an auction for £66,000 in May 2007, while at an earlier auction in September 2006 the same watch fetched $54,000. Nutting served as a consultant for both the 1950 film The Wooden Horse and the 1963 film The Great Escape. In general, Rolex has three watch lines: Oyster Perpetual, Professional and Cellini. The Cellini line is Rolex's line of dress watches. The primary bracelets for the Oyster line are named Jubilee, Oyster, President, and Pearlmaster. The watch straps on the models are usually either stainless steel, yellow gold, white gold, or rose gold. In the United Kingdom, the retail price for the stainless steel pilots range, such as the GMT Master 2, starts from £5,600. Diamond inlay watches are more expensive. The book Vintage Wristwatches by Antiques Roadshow's Rain Haynes listed a price estimate of vintage Rolex watches that range between $650 and $75,000, while listing vintage Tudors between $250 and $9,000. Rolex produced specific models suitable for the extremes of deep-sea diving, caving, mountain climbing, polar exploration, and aviation. Early professional models included the Rolex Submariner, 1953, and the Rolex Sea Dweller, 1967. The latter watch has a helium release valve, co-invented with Swiss watchmaker Doxa, to release helium gas buildup during decompression. The Explorer 1953 and Explorer 2 1971 were developed specifically for explorers who would navigate rough terrain, such as the world-famous Mount Everest expeditions. Indeed, the Rolex Explorer was launched to celebrate the successful ascent of Everest in 1953 by the expeditionary team led by Sir John Hunt. The 39mm Rolex Explorer was designed as a tool watch for rugged use, hence its movement has Paraflex shock absorbers which give them higher shock resistance than other Rolex watches. The 42mm Rolex Explorer 2 has some significant differences from the 39mm Explorer. The Explorer 2 adds a date function, and an orange 24-hour hand which is paired with the fixed bezel's black 24-hour markers for situations underground or around the poles where day cannot be distinguished from night. Another iconic model is the Rolex GMT Master, 1955, originally developed at the request of Pan Am Airways to provide its crews with a dual-time watch that could be used to display local time and GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, which was the international time standard for aviation at that time, and still is in its modern variant of Universal Time Coordinated, UTC, or Zulu time, and was needed for astronavigation, celestial navigation, during longer flights.